Welcome to Dry Cow Know-How Live, where for the next hour you'll hear from world-renowned experts in the field of dry cow nutrition. I'm Vicky Ham, Ruminant Technical Service Manager for Arm & Hammer in Europe, and I'll be chairing today's session. But you guys can get involved too. Don't forget to pose your questions in the Q&A function online, and we'll ask them to our panellists, who are today, we have our Director of R&D for New Product Development, and he's one of the godfathers of negative DCAD diets. It's Dr. Elliot Block. Then we have our Associate Director leading the field of Technical Service Team for the Americas. It's Dr. Joel Pankowski. And in that team, with over 40 years of veterinary consultancy, it's Dr. Bill Prokop. And our resident expert in transition cow nutrition and our go-to person for nutritional software, it's Dr. Ruby Wu. Welcome. So let's get started on dry cow know-how, and we'll ask a really nice, easy question to get us all started. Why is the transition period so critical for the next lactation? Elliot, let's go to you to start.
Very great question. Transition cows is basically a 21-day period, 21 days prior to calving. And that period of time can set up the cow for the rest of her lactation. What you do in that 21 days will really determine how well she's going to lactate afterwards, how many postpartum diseases she's going to have and to what severity, and also setting her up for reproductive performance shortly after calving.
And I'm glad you mentioned reproductive performance there, because Joel, you've got a lot of expertise, haven't you, in the field of reproductive. So where does that 21-day period before and after calving really influence reproduction?
Yeah, so the follicles or the eggs that the animal would produce to be fertilized in the first 50 days of lactation, we'll say, are actually produced during that transition period. So if we can get the animal to be as healthy as possible, eliminate any of the stressors that we can, both environmentally and then through nutrition, we should have better eggs available for fertilization when the time comes to end the voluntary wait period.
And Bill, obviously with your veterinary expertise, you must have seen some good things, but a lot of bad things as well. You know, what would you say is the number one thing that people get wrong when it comes to that transition period?
Over the years, perhaps the biggest problem we had in dairy cattle transitioning was clinical milk fever. And through nutritional intervention, we've all but eliminated clinical milk fever down to maybe 2 to 3%. But what we failed to recognize is that there's a subclinical form of milk fever, which can have a severe negative impact on the performance in the lactation, as Elliot and Joel both mentioned. In particular, we know that the cow is driven by dry matter intake, okay? And that's going to set the stage for preventing the problems. If we can get that cow to transition and she comes on strong eating, her negative energy balance is minimized and she will have good reproductive fertility, high peaks, and good lactational performance.
And have you seen that sort of transition from dealing with a lot of clinical issues on farm to more subclinical? You know, how is that really changing the way that we manage our dairy herds today?
Subclinical disease is a major problem on our dairies, and it by and large is due to stressors that are produced through management or mismanagement and inadequate nutrition. And understanding how we can eliminate subclinical hypocalcemia in the transition will set her up for better performance after she calves, and we won't know it because she is going to look healthy throughout. Okay.
And Ruby, obviously you have loads of experience specifically in those negative DCAD diets. How would you say that they really help with specifically that subclinical milk fever area?
Right. So using negative DCAT in a closed-up diet is a good way, and is research-proved way to help prevent clinical and subclinical hypocalcemia. And I think we're talking about transition cows, and the one thing mess up, there's leading to other thing goes wrong as well. 1983, the research from Dr. Curtis have shown the cow develop hypocalcemia have a higher association develop other disorders as well. And again, DCAT research, if you search negative DCAT on Journal of Dairy Science, you will pop up, I checked it last week, it's like 302 papers.
Wow.
So it just tons of research have shown that. So
I think the point that Ruby just made is pretty valid. The data shows that subclinical hypocalcemia is the root cause of the majority of the postpartum issues that these cows have. If you look at all the path analysis data from all the epidemiological studies that have been done probably since '85, it's repetitive. And the challenge for the dairy producer and the nutritionist and veterinarians on farm is it's not visible. It's not readily visible. So if you don't see it, it's not real in some cases, and then there's a lack of intervention. And the reason I bring that point out is because if you look at postpartum health associated with prepartum nutrition, the biggest factor in that is like what we would call non-use. Okay, there's people that do negative DCAD, there's people that do other interventions, but in reality, the majority of the dairies are doing nothing.
Okay.
They think they're doing something, but they really aren't doing anything to intervene and help these animals.
And do you think that's because they think they don't have a problem because they're not seeing those clinical cases?
It's some of it is you're so close to the situation that you're just used to it, and when we go in on a dairy, you can see it because we're not there very often. Other times, it's just these animals aren't generating revenue, so it's like, okay, we're going to invest more time in lactation than we are prepartum. I think Bill would agree with us maybe that the last 15, 20 years, people have figured out the more time we invest in that 40-day window, 20 before and 20 after, it pays off from an ROI perspective.
So it's that 80-20 rule, isn't it? If we spend 80% of our time looking at the transition period, then we're going to cruise for the rest of that lactation. And Elliot, you just wanted to come in there.
Yeah, the other comments I wanted to make, I agree completely with everything that's been said so far. I feel that one of the big problems is that as the clinical milk fevers or hypocalcemia are decreasing, you can't really measure the subclinical. You can't just take calcium levels in the blood or something like that and say, oh, I have subclinical milk fever. So they're not associating the other postpartum diseases like metritis, early onset mastitis, reproductive failures with that subclinical hypocalcemia because they don't think they have it.
Realistically and statistically, it's what we call lag. We make a decision now, and the result doesn't happen until later, and you forgot that result was the result of something we did prior.
Before, yeah.
Yeah, sounds kind of weird, but and in today's world, it's even a bigger issue than it was 30 years ago because information exchange is quicker. People want immediate results, and making an investment now is going to result in something 90 days from now.
Yeah, it's always.
I can't remember what I just had for breakfast, so I'm not going to remember what I did 90 days ago.
It's always hard, isn't it, remembering what we did yesterday, let alone 3 months ago. And I'm glad you mentioned sort of that information, the data part for this, because you have a lot of expertise with looking at dairy herd management softwares and analysing the data there. So what would you look at in those softwares to try and help at least determine that transition success?
So at least in the U.S. dairies that I work with, there's a couple of things that I joke with producers about. I can catch them in a couple of lies, so to speak. They'll tell me, for instance, that they have two groups. We used to be able to ask when you manage your dry cows, how many groups of cows do you have? So we would know then if they say two that they have a pre-fresh and a far off. Now you have to ask, how many diets do you have, because some of the folks are managing one dry cow diet all the way through, but they're still separating the cows 21 days prior. So you got to look for that. Yeah, if they're going to do a negative DCAD program, to Ruby's point, they've got to have enough time. So it's about dose and duration. There's a feed rate, and they have to have that intervention for a period of time. We know that it has to be, a minimum of 21 days in order for it to work biologically. So you go into the data and you look for things like, okay, on average, are they in there 24 days? If they are, you're in good shape. If I ask any dairy producer, they're going to tell me, I say, what's your days in close-up? They're going to say 21 days. That's the book value. Yeah. Okay? When I get in there, it's like 15, 17, 12. And it's all driven on cow pressure. When we build these new dairies, it's kind of like building a feed mill. We build a warehouse at the feed mill. The day the feed mill opens, the warehouse is too small. When we build a dairy, the day the dairy opens, the pre-fresh and post-fresh group sizes are too small. So, because they're constantly adding cows.
Yeah, and it is the only group that the cow decides when she moves out of, isn't it? So for that
Correct.
reason,
Right.
it's needs to be built bigger. But we do have our first question that's come through. So thank you to Nils in Germany, who has asked, what's the audience experience with the rations, and how do they fit into the negative DCAD strategy where they've got really high intakes? So he's talking about 17 kilos of dry matter intakes, for example, in the pre-fresh diet. What's your experience with that, Ruby?
I think 17 kilo, that's, if I have to translate to the pounds, that's going to put 30 pounds,
34,
something
yeah,
like that.
35.
That's very
35,
typical we
36,
see for Holstein cows. We see, are they talking about Jersey or Holstein? If that's a Jersey, that's amazing. But for Holstein, that's a very typical number I have seen.
Okay.
I'm guessing he's currently on the negative DCAD diets for 30 pounds of intake. I think they are in a good range of what
Okay.
we see in the U.S.
Yeah, because in Europe there's certainly a range in dry matter intakes pre-fresh, and with the bigger cows and the better genetics that we have these days, it is quite common to see 16, 17, even 18 kilos in that period, and that's great, right? Because dry matter intake is what we're targeting.
That's really good. The watch out is what all of the cows, their feed intake usually starts going down some days before calving. How much that's going to drop? I mean, if they're eating 17 kilos during the dry period, that's really good, even at the beginning of the transition period. But then all of a sudden, a week before calving, they drop to 12 kilos. Depending how far they drop, that could create a big problem, especially with energy balance and protein nutrition.
And because all cows will drop, how do we manage that drop? I mean, it's really difficult to manage dry matter intakes, in that group, because we've got cows coming in, cows going out. Yeah. What things would we look for? I mean, Bill, with your
point about dry matter intake is spot on. If I ask you what the dry cow is eating, you don't know. You can tell me the average for the group, okay? And we know that they're going to start out strong and then they're going to trail down. And just as important, we also know that during that dry period, she has certain requirements for nutrients that are different than during the lactation. And especially during the dry period, she is feeding a fetus that after 190 days of gestation is growing exponentially. And there's a tremendous demand for protein and glucose for that fetus. And if we're not recognizing her needs to feed that fetus and then develop a mammary gland later in gestation, okay, she could be eating 17 pounds, but if we don't address her needs in terms of energy and protein specifically, she's not going to perform well and we will have problems. And so the actual amount is always encouraging, but the question is, what are they actually getting? And are we building up her reserves during that dry period so when she trails off in the last week, she's still in a good place because we've fortified her system with the nutrition that we've given her up until that point.
Ruby just wanted to come in there.
So I think I see a few things can do for freestyle push feed. as frequent as possible, right? Now, next thing, if you see empty bank, 2 a.m., whatever, if you're setting right now at a 3% residue, move it up to 5%. Moving cows, like Joe mentioned, the window. Okay, can you now do multiple times per week instead of doing once per week or once per 2 weeks? Can you cut your moving from far off dry to close up dry to a little bit bigger window, 21, 28 days? That give you a little bit of room that you don't have to move them that frequently. And another thing is like, if possible, don't commingle multi-parous cows and the first lactation. All of are those things we can try to do to minimize the competition of the cows and disturbance of the social group. That way, make sure the shy cow, the aggressive cow, don't take that much advantage of the shy cow. So.
Elliot, did you just want to come in? We've got some great questions coming in. So
Just quick comment. One is to add overcrowding to that. Because when they're overcrowded, these cows, especially coming close to calving, they're nervous. They're not going to stand for it. They'll just won't eat and they'll walk away.
Well, and that's defined overcrowding for this group. It's not 100% of bunk space or stalls. In this group, you want it to be 85 to 90%. And again, to my point earlier, we tend to push the pressure on that. And it goes back to the whole dose and duration thing, to Ruby's point. If they're not in there long enough, or they don't get enough because of competition or other environmental issues, or you have both situations going on, you can't expect the program to do what we tell it you will.
Rations are formulated for percentages of nutrients.
Correct.
People are not thinking about how much they're eating. It's the amount of nutrient they're getting per day that they need. Whether they're getting that in 30 pounds or 30 kilos or 17 kilos, you gotta have, it's irrelevant. You have to have those grams of protein, those energy densities.
Okay. So, John, what you're saying is you don't have to be 100% to see the problems. As soon as you've gone over that 85% threshold,
You're overcrowded.
You're
You're overcrowded.
Something that has to be mentioned here when we're talking about overcrowding, we've come to understand that the cow goes through an inflammatory response when we stress her. And that can be overcrowding, that any number of factors. And the point being that we've now seen that not only is there an association with fresh cow disease and hypocalcemia, but inflammation apparently plays a big role in that hypocalcemia as well. And it's yet to be elucidated as actually what's going on there. But anytime you stress a cow during transition, you're setting yourself up for fresh cow problems. And it could be very typically a hypocalcemic situation.
Great. Right, let's get to these questions from our audience. Okay, first up we have Robert from England, and he's asked the subclinical issues in pre-lactation heifers, do they need to be managed differently from multiparous cows? Ruby, I see you smiling. Let's go to you.
I actually did dig it a couple of years ago. So I would like to refer to papers I really like. Okay. The first one is a 2021 paper from University of Florida. I think that was Dr. Santos' study on that. I like that paper because a lot of study, they involve multiparous cows and first lactating, and that one designed just for looking at for heifers. Yeah. And what they are looking at are 3 treatments, -15, -5, +20. And they were looking at, okay, for the first lactating cows, what's the consequences? There's no stats difference on the milk yield, no matter which diets you're going for that 3 treatment. Now, prepartum urine pH, of course, the lowest one is on a -15. Next one, that's a linear effect. Next one is -5, then +20. Intake prepartum, -15 is lower, and then -5, then +20. Postpartum, they see a quadratic effect, actually 2 quadratic effects. One is the milk fever, I believe, is lowest on the -5 versus -15 or +20. And the other thing I think they were looking at is uterine health, which is also the quadratic best for the -5. So that's a 2021 study just designed for first lactating cows.
And the other thing that they saw in that paper was the intakes postpartum were lower with the extremely negative.
Extreme negative.
With the extreme negativity. So there's a couple of confusing things in their industry right now, just semantic conversations. This term fully acidified and being too negative Bottom line is you just have to create an environment with the ration in the cow that is below pH 7.
Okay.
Okay.
Urine pH.
Yeah, urine pH 7. You don't need to have something that's at -5 to do that. When you do that, the research would show that that acidotic situation continues into the lactation. You can't just shift it over.
Because I think there is certainly a lot of confusion about where that negative DCAD level needs to be,
Right.
where that urine pH needs to be. So what you're saying from this 2021 study
Yep.
is at the -5, so that's on a per 100 grams basis. In Europe, we generally use on a per kilo basis, so it's going to be -50. That's better from a dry matter intake point of view, and it still achieves the benefits in terms of subclinical disease reduction.
Well, and you optimize your startup milk.
Yeah,
Okay,
optimize
and the
milk.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't any difference in yield, did you
Yeah,
say?
there's no difference on milk yield no matter which treatment you go. Then you don't have advantage of that where you go
For first
that
calf
negative.
heifers.
First lactate,
For
correct.
lactation.
Yeah.
And that sort of that -5, -50 negative DCAD, that would be similar for multiparas as well? Is there any-
Multiparas, I would recommend go about -8 to -12. That give you
Okay.
urine pH probably between 6.0 to 6.8. For first lactating for the heifers, probably around the -5, -8, a little bit shorter window because they don't need to be acidified that much. And for that, your urine pH probably looking at 6.5 to 6.8, like again, a smaller window for that. So
Okay, but we don't need to go below 6.
yeah,
for
we don't
urine
need to
pH.
go
That's
below
too
six.
low.
No,
That's too
no.
low.
Elliot?
The only issue, ideally, you would have them separated from the first animals that are calving the first time versus multiparas cows. The problem on a lot of farms, if you have a huge farm and a huge group, you can do that. You can separate
Yeah.
them out. Smaller farms, it's very difficult to even have one group, let alone now trying to have two groups. So, the compromise is to go something like a -6 or -8 for all the cows, rather than trying to get -5 for the first calvers and get into -8 to 12 for the multiparas.
Thanks, Elliot. Let's go to our audience question here. As far as transition period is concerned, what's the panel opinion on how a transition period should be considered on dairy on a reality basis? Sorry, I can't read this. It's too far away. I need some glasses to zoom it in. 7 -21 +21 were considered currently. So how many days should we add in prepartum or post-period? Okay, so I think this question is about, is it that -21 +21, is that what we're considering as our transition?
That's the window.
Critical.
That's
That is
the
the
That
critical
is the
window.
critical window.
Okay.
Now, it could be extended. You can have more days you don't have to have, when we say 21 days, it could be 35. There's research that shows you can go 45 days, not a problem, except the expense of having that more expensive diet fed for longer. But that's the trade-off.
Bill?
My experience, if I want 21 days, I'm going to say I want 28
Yeah.
because
Yep.
stuff happens, okay? And to allow that extra 7 days is so critical for the cow, and it's incidental to management.
It's how many days you're managing those cows for. Some of them are going to fall outside the window. We see that on the best farms.
Yeah.
They calve early. The breeding, the pregnancy date was miscalculated. So there's stuff that happens. But if you're managing your herd for 21 to 28 days prepartum as a transition period, hopefully you're going to hit at least 90% of your cows that are going to fall in that window.
Well, and from a real world perspective, it has to do with herd size and operations on the farm, management on the farm. Our larger dairies in the U.S., they move these cows once a week. So there's always a 7-day window, okay? The smaller dairies, for instance, I do technical support in Canada. Our Canadian producers, they have smaller dairies due to their quota system. They move cows on the day. They do a little better job of quality control because they do it on the day. They have less cows to deal with, so they don't see that variation.
Okay.
and they can stick to 21 days is 21 days.
Right.
But in the U.S., the larger dairies, again, you've got that 7-day swing. So to Bill's point, to get 21, you're going to have some that are at 28.
Aim for 28.
Yeah.
And this comes back to, Ruby, your earlier point about reducing the stress and moving animals
Yes,
at least once,
exactly.
just stick to that once a week movement period. Yeah.
Yep.
One more comment. I've seen successful anionic diets in herds that had one group for the entire time with heifers and late lactation cows. The physiologic effect is not detrimental, it's beneficial, okay? And it can be adapted to any management style and size. I have clients in the EU that top dress the anionic feed to certain groups in the close-up to affect those changes, to acidify the diet. So there's no such thing as it can't be done here, okay? I've seen it adapted to all situations very successfully.
Thanks, Bill. Right, we've got more questions coming in. So the next one, again from Niels in Germany, is what is the recommendation for metabolizable protein? Is it still 1,250 grams per cow per day? And Ruby, you are our go-to person, certainly for AMTS and NDS. So I'm going to come to you. What's your formulation sort of like boundaries, or what do you design rations for today?
We're talking about MP, the metabolizable
Yes.
protein. Yeah.
Yes.
1,200 gram, 1,300 gram. That's still we're targeting on, and there's a lot of research in. And I'm glad whoever asked that question probably using CNCPS model, either right AMTS, NDS, right. So those all have a good. Because MP again is a model level. It's not a lab value that you can test the feed to get it. You have to plug your feed in the ration and pop it out. So yes, that's still our target.
He is delivered, metabolizable protein is delivered in a ration by ingredients, but depending how that ration is put together, different things happen in the rumen, and you're going to get different outflows of protein to the intestine. And that's what we're trying to formulate for. You pretty much need a software to do that. Yeah, and I would agree with Ruby that this 12 to 1,300 grams for Holsteins, if you're feeding your heifers separately, you'd like to have those first calvers have a little bit more protein than that.
Just for a bit of the growth element.
Because they're still growing. I mean, the fetus is taking the same amount of nutrients, whether it's a, new lactation or a fifth lactation. The fetus is still growing with the same nutrients.
And Bill, I know you've done a lot of research and experience with protein specifically in that transition period. Why is protein and metabolizable protein so important for that transition cow?
So at 190 days, the fetus has a tremendous growth demand, and the only way she can get enough glucose to that fetus is either with glucose, which is limited, or gluconeogenesis, the conversion of protein amino acids to glucose. And that's where her protein reserves are so critical. And that's why, in my opinion, when I start with far-off cows, I want at least 1,200 grams of metabolizable protein.
In the far-off diet as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And work that's being done by at Purdue is showing that probably we have to take a much harder look at what her protein reserves are in the late lactation to get her prepared more adequately for transition. Okay, so I used to say that the lactation starts the day you dry her off. Well, now the next lactation is probably starting in the late lactation, and we don't even realize it, what's going to happen. Okay. Secondly, we've got to consider mammogenesis. She's going to build an udder for lactation, and that on average takes an additional 200 grams a day. So to go from 1,200 to 1,400 or 1,300 plus is not a stretch. That's the physiological need. She needs those proteins, and more specifically what she needs is amino acids. That's what we're talking about here, okay? And so to supply that is a success story.
And if I can add to that, mammals, cows specifically in this case, don't have a lot of protein reserves. We don't have like fat stores, we have energy reserves. Calcium, we have reserves in the bones. There really isn't very little protein storage, and if the cow doesn't have enough metabolizable protein at any point, she starts doing things like using her liver enzymes, using other enzymes, breaking them down for proteins. And that's when you get into some of these subclinical issues.
Because we always hear a lot about negative energy balance, but negative protein balance doesn't really get as much airtime, does it? And it's just as key, if not more, would you say? Or
Well, as far as being detrimental to the cow and the calf, obviously a deficiency is always, a negative energy or protein balance is always detrimental. But I would say that protein plays a bigger role in that 21-day prepartum period on the calf and cow than energy.
Okay. All right, next question brings in grazing. So does the transition period depend upon the feeding system? So in grazing versus stall feeding, how can we optimize transition in a grazing herd? I'm guessing
It's a difficult question. It's what is the nutrient balance of the entire feed that she's eating? So the ration. So whether she's grazing or on stored forages, you have a nutrient composition and an estimated intake of the pasture, right? You need that in order to formulate your supplement. The requirements are the same, right? There may be a little bit of an energy bump because of more activity. Right, how far are they going from the barn? But otherwise, nutrition's the same.
Okay. Doesn't matter when it comes from fresh grass, soil grass, right, where...
As long as it's good quality,
it's good quality.
It doesn't matter.
And it's fresh and free of mycotoxins.
Is the question, how do you have a delivery system to get the
That's the
anionic
challenge.
feed to those cows?
Yep.
We want to analyze all the forages. If we don't do the analysis, we can't do an anionic diet because we need to know what the minerals are, okay? And then the protein and the energy components as well. And so at some point, there has to be a supplement offered to those transition cows that would include the anionic feed. And I'm emphasizing the word feed here because unlike anionic salts, the feed that we offer has got to be palatable. And the feed that Church and Dwight, Arm & Hammer produces is BioChlor, and it is palatable. I've seen it top dressed and the cows will eat it.
The pasture scenario is no different than a smaller dairy that doesn't have the pens to split the cows into two groups, okay? In my mind, it's you want to find a way to manage those cows for the entire dry period, okay? And ideally, in a negative DCAD supplement would help. And you're probably going to make it at one of the higher numbers like Ruby talked about. You're not going to feed the whole 45 or 50-day dry period with a -12. You're probably going to try to hit something in that -6, -5 number because it's about dose and duration. It's the total negativity over the period of time. So if we widen the window, we can lower or actually increase the negativity to, instead of -8 to -5, that type of thing.
And I'm glad you've come back to the level of DCAD because we've got a number of questions on the chat that are all fairly similar. So I'm going to try and tick them all off at once. So we've got questions about that range in urine pH again. Does a lower pH, for example, help more with stress? And what is the range in urine pH? And how does that relate to like partial DCAD again?
So we talked about that earlier. It's really simple. The whole goal is to produce an acidification in the blood to pull calcium out of the bones to buffer, okay? In order to do that, by definition, the blood's got to be below pH 7, right? And in order to check that, have a proxy for that, we use urine pH. It's highly correlated. The urine pH of these cows, to Ruby's point, 6 to 6.5. That's where you're shooting for. That's good enough. You go much lower than that, then the data shows the animals will have an extended acidotic period into lactation, which will affect their startup milk and their intakes. So all those questions are interweaved, and it's the same answer.
Yeah. And there's also a number of questions on the chat about this whole partial DCAD again. And early, it sounds like we need to do away with that phrase.
There's no such thing as a partial DCAD or partial acidification.
There we go, you've heard it here. Yeah. There's no such thing.
You're either acidified or you're not acidified.
Okay.
It's like a little bit pregnant. You're not.
Okay.
You either are or you aren't.
I think they mean like a normal acidifier or over acidified, right? That's probably the partial. They mean the normal.
That's
Acidified means over.
That's
the
the marketing.
semantic
That's the
issue.
marketing issues
Yeah.
we've got right now.
But if
yeah, the whole idea of fully acidified or partial if they're below pH 7,
They're
they're
acidified.
acidified.
They're acidified,
by
yeah.
definition.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yep.
That's it.
It's like a high school experiment. Stick the litmus paper in. If it's
Turns
acidic,
blue,
if it's acidic, it's acidic. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And
But what
how
I'd like to add is one of the issues we've had that I've seen in the field is doing proper feed analysis on the mineral content of the forages. If you don't get proper mineral analyses done, you can't really balance for DK. You
Well-
can balance for anything you want, right, on paper. But
Let's define what proper is.
yeah, that's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Is that you need chemical analyses, not NIR, near-infrared reflectance analyses. You need to know what the true sodium, potassium, chlorine, and sulfur values are in order to be able to formulate. Because most of those minerals are coming from your feeds, not from your DCAT supplement. The DCAT supplement is just supplementing. It's pushing that DCAT a little bit further, negative or positive. So if that isn't done, and it's difficult sometimes, especially with pastures, because they change on a daily basis. So what I've found with some producers and some nutritionists out there, nutrition groups, that are taking more frequent urine pH and just raising or lowering the anionic supplement so that they hit that urine pH that they have. Because they can't do mineral analysis on a daily basis, and by the time you get it back, it's done, it's changed already.
So this is where urine pH really comes into its own
Yeah.
when fine-tuning that diet to get it into that sweet spot.
Exactly. But if you're feeding stored feeds and your ration is pretty stable, you do urine pHs when you first set up so that you know that you're hitting the right range, and then maybe you want to check occasionally to make sure that all the cows are still there. But doing urine pHs, actually some producers say, I love it because I won't even stop doing it because it forces me to go look at those cows. And those are the most critical cows on the farm to look at.
And I really like that because it almost acts as an early warning system.
It is.
And what are the system or feeding strategies?
You see a lot of stuff when you go visit those 21-day prepartum cows.
Again, coming back to the fact that if we spend the majority of our focus at that point in time, we're going to reap the rewards further down the
Exactly.
line.
You asked about dry matter intake several times. This is one of the first surrogates of knowing if our cows are eating, because if they are, you're going to acidify the diet, or someone's not putting the supplement in. But the point being, it gives us a chance to intervene process control-wise and say the system isn't working the way it's supposed to, and find out why before it's too late. So.
Thanks, Bill. A question coming in about milk yields reducing around 30 days after calving.
That's a good question.
What could be the influencing factors there?
So it's often misinterpreted in the field as a milk fever,
Okay.
and it's not.
Right.
The symptoms for milk fever, calcium deficiency, are no different than magnesium deficiency. They're pretty much the same. It's the timing of the onset that's different. To Bill's point, milk fever is going to happen at calving within
24
48
hours.
hours. Yeah, 24 to 48 hours. That's a situation where there's definitely a magnesium issue going on, and it looks just like a milk fever. You'll hear these guys say, "Yeah, I got early lactation milk fevers."
And this is
No,
the cows going down at 30 days?
Yeah.
Well,
that's
the
what
question
they're
was,
saying.
30 days of
postpartum.
milk.
More than likely, it's magnesium deficiency. Magnesium extremely important, and I think a lot of diets are not at the levels of magnesium they need to be, prepartum and postpartum. The other issue is that sometimes, that's also a time that subclinical metritis,
An inflammatory
there's
response.
some inflammatory response is happening. Could be metritis, could be a
Yep.
subclinical mastitis, subclinical anything causes inflammation, which will reduce feed intake and milk production.
Okay. Ruby.
Just add one more thing on magnesium is it's not 100% bioavailability. So
right.
in a
Great
diet,
point.
you think you are feeding, say, 0.45%
Great point.
magnesium. My cows, maybe 30%. magnesium sulfate, which I prefer using it for prepartum, and that's maybe 70%. Again, the quality, is it a fine particle, which you have to be soluble first to be absorbed, right? And are they coarse, which probably have a lower solubility? And Dr. Jesse Goff have a white vinegar way to test it out, how well they can, burn the alkali. That means how much they can be bioavailable. So yeah, just add a note here. It's not 100% available.
It's a good point.
She makes a good point because, Elliot comments that we're deficient, but the computer says we're spot on because the computer's assuming 100% bioavailability. It's an assumption.
Right. Okay.
And different sources, the oxides, for instance, we know they're not bioavailable.
And when we're formulating diets, there is a little bit of debate, I suppose, in the literature and in the field on levels of calcium or magnesium and even phosphorus in the diets as well for that reason. What would be your recommendations for those mineral levels in pre-fresh diets?
For me, mineral levels pre-fresh and post-fresh for magnesium, you want to have this 0.45 minimum percent of the diet. To Ruby's point, check the source. If it's a cheap Magox source, probably not very available and you should bump it up. If it is, there are sources that are better. They're processed more, they're finer. You'll be better off. Calcium is a big point of debate. Do we have low calcium prepartum, high calcium prepartum? Personally, based on the